Hi everyone, we are now into Module 5 in our progression towards understanding a little bit more about rehabilitation counseling. So I hope that everybody has got their fill of legislation at this point. I know that it can be a little bit overwhelming, but I promise you that knowing about all the pieces of legislation that are out there and that can apply to both you and your clients is useful knowledge to have down the line. So for this module, Module 5, I don't have a PowerPoint. Why? Because I think everything that I could provide to you that has to do with credentialing, with accreditation, I didn't really need a PowerPoint to provide that. So in terms of studying for the exam, just rely solely on the lecture notes. And of course, hopefully you're taking some additional notes on your own about the role of accreditation and what it means for the counseling profession, what it means for you as students. So I'm just going to take a little bit of your time today. I know there's a lot of videos to watch, but a little bit of your time kind of reviewing what accreditation means, where we have come from, and also licensure and certification and the difference between the two. So accreditation, you all are probably at this point familiar with the term CACREP, right? And that is the accreditation body for all counselor education programs in the country. So accreditation has been around for a long time. In the past, there were different entities that would accredit different types of counseling programs. So we have counseling profession as a whole, and then we of course have all these specialty areas in counseling or within counseling, right? So there's rehabilitation counseling as a specialty area, school counseling, addictions counseling, career counseling, like the university type career counseling. There are family and marriage counselors out there, though there's a different body that accredits specific family and marriage therapy programs. So there's a difference between like an LMFT and a family counselor, okay? And certification and licensure are different for that as well. What else am I forgetting here? School counseling, did I say that? I might have said that. So there's a number of them. Clinical mental health, of course, I'm forgetting that one, right? So there's a lot of different specialty areas, but we all operate now under this one accreditation body, which means that we as educators are holding ourselves to a certain standard. We are agreeing to maintain standards for the education that we're providing to master's level students and doctoral level students if a program has a doctoral level accredited program under CACREP. So it's a guideline. Basically, it's guidelines, I should say, for educators to develop coursework and materials and core coursework. So you can look up CACREP standards. Right now, our program is operating under the 2009 CACREP standards. There's a 2016 set of standards, and then there's a CACREP body of professionals, the CACREP board of directors that is working diligently on the 2023 CACREP standards. So the standards are continuously reviewed and revised because things in our profession change. And so the great thing I think about the newer revisions that are coming out, or what we hear are going to be new revisions to CACREP accredited programs, is that there's an increased focus on disability, on the inclusion of disability studies within every specialty area, and advocacy initiatives that students should be taking, things we should be teaching about in terms of advocacy, social justice issues, and things of that nature, which I think is great. I always found it interesting that in a rehab counseling program, I had to take a class on like family and couples counseling, but people in family counseling programs may not have had to have taken a class on disabilities or rehabilitation counseling. So I think it's great that they're expanding that in terms of a core area of knowledge that all counselor educators should be teaching and all counseling students should be learning about. Prior to rehabilitation counseling programs being accredited under CACREP, there was a different entity called CORE. And so actually when I went through the program here at WVU, we were accredited under CORE. And so there was a massive shift, a number of years back at this point, where CORE and CACREP finally came to an agreement where they felt that they could merge the two accreditation bodies. And it was a massive step in terms of a shift in our educational standards, in addition of coursework that may not have been required under CORE. And it was a shift from those of us on the education side of it, a massive shift in coming to an agreement that this was needed, it was necessary. And so we we'll talk about this a little bit more later on in the semester too, and maybe just always, but counselor specialty areas have always done a really great job at kind of operating in their own silos. So, school counselors did what school counselors do, and clinical mental health counselors did what they do. It used to be called community mental health. And then rehab counselors were in their own little silo, and we did what we wanted to do and needed to do. And there wasn't a lot of intermingling among each of the specialty areas. And so this was kind of the last movement of counselor educators towards a unification of these core areas of knowledge, core areas of competence that every counseling specialty area felt like were important for all the counseling students moving forward. So it was a big deal. It took a lot of time to get there. There have been many efforts to combine core and KCREP in the past that didn't come to fruition. So when it finally did, it was a big step. So that's a little bit about accreditation. It's a really important thing that you come from an accredited program. First and foremost, because licensure bodies at the state level require it to a certain degree. If you don't have it, so let's say you graduated from a program like myself. My master's program was core, my PhD program was KCREP, but let's say I didn't go on to pursue the doctorate and I was just coming from a core program. So then I would need to kind of justify to a licensure board potentially that the core courses that I had in my master's level program that was not accredited by KCREP back in the day met the requirements for licensure within that state. So it's important that you are graduating from a KCREP program, because you basically don't have to worry about that when you go to apply for licensure. Woo, one thing off the table, right? So it's a good thing. It's also important that you recognize how rigorous of a curriculum that we have because of the KCREP accreditation standards, and that when you get into your placements, your practicum, and your internship, there's a reason why we operate the way we do, and that we have all these benchmarks, and we do the gatekeeping, and we make sure that we are watching out for who may not actually be a good fit in the profession, that we're really tracking all the hours that you're getting in internship and practicum. It's because of the standards that we have to adhere to. And the last thing we want as a program is to lose that accreditation. That's a bad thing. So it's a good thing that you all are in an accredited program. Makes your life easier down the road. It helps us maintain our standards, high standards for quality and performance of ourselves as educators. So that's a little bit about accreditation. So moving on to certification and licensure. Now this is really important. You will hear about this on an exam, okay? Yay, glad you listened to me today. Certification and licensure are not the same, not in any way. Individuals that graduate from master's programs come out prepared to sit for certification exams, okay? So once you get out of this program, you can sit for the CRC exam. You pass it, right? Everybody's gonna pass. You pass it, then you can put the CRC at the end of your name. You are a certified rehabilitation counselor. The CRC is a national certification. If you're a CRC in West Virginia, you are one in Pennsylvania and in Georgia and in North Carolina and in California and Alaska. Doesn't matter where you live, CRC is national. You could also take the NCE exam, the National Counselor Education Certification, right? So then you could be a nationally certified counselor. Same thing, just for counselors, right? This was traditionally, if you came out of a rehab counseling program, you were only looking at the CRC. If you came out of clinical mental health, you were looking at the NCE exam. Now we're seeing a little bit more overlap. You want to look into your state licensing requirements, because some states, just a few of them, still only want the NCC exam, okay? The National Certified Counselor exam, the NCE, sorry, all these acronyms. But the majority of states now will accept a CRC as the equivalent, and they are equivalent. Different types of exams. I've taken both of them. I don't want to take either one of them again. But you get these nice little credentials at the end of your name. What that also means is that you have to accumulate hours of continuing education to maintain those credentials. For each one, it's 100 hours. There's ethics requirements under each of them as well. So I had to have like 10 credits, 10 CEUs of ethics related material in my overall package of 100 hours to maintain certification for the 5-year period. There's dues that come along with it. So there's a cost that's added to it. Most jobs will require that you have one or the other certifications, depending on where you're going. Now, there are other certifications you're going to learn about that I've got videos on, and additional links to other types of certifications that somebody could get, certifications as addiction specialists, certifications in trauma-related counseling. These are all things that you can tack on, basically. You can add on at any point in your career if you want to. They all do require additional coursework typically. It just depends on the certification body. So that's certification, okay? Remember, much different than licensure. None of you will graduate from this program being licensed counselors. Surprise, surprise, okay? You can graduate being eligible to sit for exams for national certification. Once you have the national certification under your belt, and really you could take it, they offer them multiple times throughout the year. A lot of times if you submit your application package for the exam, if you can show that you've completed the majority of your coursework, that you are currently enrolled in like an internship, right, because you're going to be taking it typically the final semester, you can go ahead and take the exam, and then provided that you actually graduate, you're good to go. So, you could get that diploma in hand and technically be a certified counselor like 0.5 seconds later, right? But you're not going to be licensed in the state, okay? So once you have graduated, once you've got that certification, whatever exam you decided to take, then you can apply for licensure, okay? So then you're able to go to your state licensing board, given that assuming you've met all the standards of the licensing board, which is the focus of this week's discussion, right? I want you to look into your licensing board if that's something you're interested in doing, and find out what those requirements are, because they're different for every state. Licensure is not portable, meaning that if I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of West Virginia, I am not a licensed professional counselor in the state of Pennsylvania automatically. You can transfer transfer licensure from state to state if you're going to move. There's additional paperwork that has to be done. But it's really important to understand that you graduate, you are not automatically a licensed professional counselor. Putting those letters at the end of your name would be unethical, so you don't want to do that. Even when you apply for the status, if you get what's typically considered like a provisional license, some states refer to it as like an associate LPC, basically like you're almost there but not quite. You can then represent yourself accordingly, okay? But even after you've submitted your documentation to start accumulating the hours, which is the key part of an LPC, you can't put the LPC at the end of your name, okay? So you always want to be careful about how you're representing yourself, because it becomes an ethical thing, right? Once you are a provisional counselor, an associate, LPC, whatever they call it in your state, then you start accumulating hours. Again, this is a big area of difference. Some states require 2,000 hours of supervised work, supervised counseling. Some states require up to I think 3,500 might be the most out there in the country. So it's always around between 2,000 and 3,000 additional hours or hours. Some of it you can count your practicum and internship, but you have to be working in a counseling position, tracking your hours, and under supervision during that time. Typically, the application packages are a lot of paperwork, a lot of headache. For West Virginia, you have to have personal references as well as professional references. You have to write out your theory of practice. You have to submit educational documents, all your transcripts. You have to fill out forms. I mean, it's just... You have to find a supervisor prior to submitting the package. You have to tell them where you're going to be working. So there's a lot of extra things that go along with applying for licensure. Now you might be wondering, why in the world am I worried about this in my very first semester, 6 weeks into the program? Because it takes this much time, and because I want you to start thinking about it now, so that if you're interested in doing this, you can start to gather the paperwork, you can start to fill out papers well before you graduate, so that you can put everything in and start accumulating those hours right after graduation. Because the sooner you do that, the sooner you're going to earn that LPC, the sooner you can put those letters at the end of your name, and then do the things that everybody with an LPC wants to do, like run their own private practice, right? Set your own hours, be your own boss. So, and in addition to that, a lot of jobs do require that. Or you'll see on job advertisements that you either have an LPC or you are LPC eligible, right? That means that you've got the credentials for it, you're just working towards the LPC itself. So with that, I will leave you guys to be looking at your state licensure boards. Simple Google searches should get you in the right direction, okay? Look at the application packets, make sure that you have a full understanding of what that looks like. If you're just interested in being a certified counselor, please, again, this is going to be what you're going to do for the discussion board. You're going to be looking at the NCC or NBCC website, the National Board of Certified Counselors, or you're going to be looking at CRCC, which is the Certification for Rehabilitation Counselors entity. So look at one or the other. Again, I want you to be very familiar with what both exams look like, what goes into applying to sit for the exam. So it's not that you can just like walk in the door to the testing center and say, hey, I'm here to take, the NCE. You have to kind of go through the process to make sure that they're signing off on it. And I want you to be familiar with what it requires in terms of continuing eds later on too. So let me know what you find out. I think you'll find as we get into the discussion board that everything differs a little bit, and I'll be back in the discussions.